Welcome back to the NFPA lecture for Muscular Strength and Endurance. Today's lecture is going to focus on how we actually implement different types of training protocols, how we incorporate a lot of the science, the physiology, the specific courses, the specific routines, the theories behind them, and how we go about it. So we're going to kind of explore some of that today. General training principles of any weight training program include specificity, and these definitions will be in your resource manual. Specificity is going to apply to, what type of specific program are you doing? What type of specific type of training are you doing? For example, if you're training to be a better bench presser, you need to specifically train the bench press. You wouldn't want to do push-ups and not do bench presses if you want to specifically be a good bench presser. Now, that's not to say that supplementing push-ups with that wouldn't help, but you definitely have to do the specific movement and train the specific muscle you're trying to train. Now, the SAID principle is your specific adaptation to imposed demands principle. And what that's about is it's a little bit different in that regard. And what that's more about is like if you're training for endurance, you need to train endurance methods. If you're training to do high rep bench presses, you need to train in a high rep manner. You don't want to train in a low rep 1 to 3 rep like a power lifter, like a max out. You would want to train specifically for that. In reverse, if you wanted to specifically overload the muscle to do like low rep max out bench presses, you would want to make sure in your routine you specifically train that type of muscle fiber, your fast twitch, power fibers, and that's really what the SAID principle is about. And that can also apply with aerobic type of training as well. Overload is referring to, the overloading of a muscle. A lot has to do with hypertrophy and strength. And what we mean by that is in order for muscle to change and adapt, we must overload it. And that might be implemented in different ways. A lot of times people think it's all about increasing the weight, bench pressing more, curling more, things like that. But it also has to do with how much volume you're adding, the frequency, all those principles all kind of are included with overloading the muscles. What the whole idea of overload is we're overloading. If your body's used to a certain load, a certain amount of weight, a certain amount of intensity, then you need to try to go above and beyond that in some form or fashion to make the body adapt, and that would be the overload principle. Frequency is determining how often a person might train. When you're talking about with weight training, when we're talking about per muscle group, we want a minimum of 1 day off in between. So like most people, you're going to start off, you're going to have a relatively low volume, which would be the total number of sets, which is our next definition. You want to do it maybe 3 days a week, like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, if you were going to do like a full body workout, and that would be the frequency there. If you increase the volume, you're probably going to decrease the frequency. As a person progresses and they need maybe more than one major chest exercise, one major bicep exercise, one major leg exercise, so forth and so on, they might need to add 2 or 3 chest exercises. Now we're starting to train kind of more like an advanced trainer. Maybe you could say a bodybuilding type training. Well, when you do maybe instead of 1 exercise for chest, for example, you might do 3 different angles for chest, which might mean you've upped the volume to maybe a total of 9 to 12 sets total instead of 3 or 4, which way you started off when you first started training. Well, if we're going to increase that volume, I'm going to probably need more than just 1 day off in between to be able to recover from that high of stress level on the muscle. In addition to that, you're going to be also probably splitting up your workouts into different upper versus lower, or maybe push versus pull, or things of that nature. So as you increase the volume, you're probably going to see a decrease in frequency. That's more along the lines when we're talking about with weight training. With cardiovascular, you can actually increase both. Cardiovascular is more about endurance. It's about going longer. And so it's not about a tearing down, if you will. The muscle trauma is not the same as anaerobic training with weight training or resistance training. So with frequency, as a person gets more advanced, they're actually going to be able to train their cardiovascular more frequency, and they're going to be able to do more volume on top of that as their cardiovascular response improves. Adaptation is kind of what we just talked about. As the body adapts, we want to continue to recognize that we need to take it slow and steady and change as we need to. I use the analogy with a car, shift the gears as need be. You know, don't start a person off with a high level training, even if they say, I want to run a marathon. That doesn't mean they go run a marathon the first week just to see if they can do it. You need to put them on an appropriate workout, gradually adapt them, and we'll talk about that later specifically. Progressive resistance. You want to gradually progress them with increased resistance, different types of stimulus to training. Maintenance. You're going to get to a point where a person, you know, you're just not going to get stronger and stronger and stronger the rest of your life. I mean, at this point, I've been training for about 22, 23 years, and I'm not going to get significantly stronger. My type of training is more maintenance. It doesn't mean I can't improve, but it's not going to be a linear improvement like it was when I first started training. I could see noticeable changes per se, especially in the strength region. That's not to say the quality can't get better, but you get into a point of maintenance, even with the statement, for example, if you're not going ahead, you're going behind in business, that kind of applies here. You still want to push the client, you still want to give them new things, you want to change things up, but you're going to get to the point where they're only going to do so much as far as doing anything but maintaining. Now, the opposite of that would be retrogression or reversibility. And that's going to be more along the lines of if a person detrains, if you want to call it that, they are not training as often, they haven't been coming to the gym as much, they've been doing half as much work as they usually did, they are going to regress. They're going to lose some strength, they're going to lose some endurance, they're going to lose some of their conditioning, they're going to lose some muscle mass, they're probably going to gain some body fat as well. And that is something that can happen obviously as well if a person doesn't stay at the same level or around the same level they did to get there. Variation, obviously you need to make sure you're doing variety of training. That's one of the things that trainers can do for clients, is you do not want to be in quote-unquote a routine. And what I mean by that is you want a person to be consistent. You want a person to have a plan. You want a person to have done an exercise long enough they get proficient at it. But what you don't want to have happen is 6 months from now, you know, even 3 or 4 months from now, they're doing the exact same routine with zero variance, even if they're progressing with their weights, repetitions, and volume. You want to make sure you're changing angles a little bit, whether it's the grip width, whether we go from a barbell to a dumbbell, whether we go from free weights to machine weights, where we go from cables to maybe using a Bosu ball for stability, things like that. Add a variety in there, give the joints a break, train the body different ways, and it's also going to train the mind different ways.